Welcome to the Planner Jam 2019. I'm really glad you guys are here. This is going to be a little bit longer of a Planner Jam, which is why I scheduled it. I feel like without scheduling these things, they don't happen, at least for me. So I've gone through this process already, and I wanted to share it with you. I am sharing a lot of material from a woman named Jamie Ridler, so I'm giving her props for that, for her input. And this has worked really well for me, and I just wanted to share it because I thought it was relevant to the kinds of things that I've talked about in Planner Jam stuff before. So make sure that you have your planner or calendar with you, that you have a pen or something to write with, that you have a journal or just some paper, and then some Post-it notes. If you don't have Post-it notes, scraps of paper, index cards are fine, and some tape maybe. And since we're settling in here, I hope you have a nice cup of tea or some snacks or whatever. We'll take a brief break in the middle, but here we go. So I wanted to start with some questions that other people have asked who were not able to join us. So we're going to start there, and if you would like to answer, I would love that. Just unmute yourself. So the first question is, how do you incorporate your digital life with a paper planner? Pipe right on in.
I pretty much just have my out of the house appointments on my digital planner, and then my paper planner is the thing that I look at every morning and throughout the day.
And do you do any crossover?
Yeah, I mean, I have to have any outside appointments in both, otherwise I won't be where I'm supposed to be.
How do you make sure that they actually get put in both?
Well, if I'm out of the house, then it just goes in the digital planner. I do have like the smaller planner this year, and so I might be carrying it with me more, and in that case I can write it down in both. But every morning I'll check my calendar for the month and make sure that I have everything in for the week on my planner.
Oh, that's a good idea. So like once a week, you just kind of check and double check that that things have been put in.
Right. Yeah. Monday morning is when I kind of check in with all of my calendars and make sure everything's in sync, and then I know where I'm supposed to be.
Nice. I do that. I mean, I don't have a scheduled time, but it seems that I either do it Monday morning or Saturday or Sunday afternoon. That just seems to be when I tend to do the same. Yeah. Anybody else want to pipe in on that question? All right, we'll move on. So the other question was, if you have a to-do list on a day with a lot of meetings, how do you schedule that to-do list? Or do you even bother? Hi, Nora. If you, you'll need to, oh, you can't hear me? Can everybody else hear me?
Jeffrey can.
Okay, cool.
Well,
let's see.
I can respond to the to-do list, I guess, if you want me to.
Yeah, please.
I set up a flow that's like a set list for a band. We usually use that little like next, like one song flows into another, and I usually like layer those to-do items into the overall flow. But when you get a big day, you've got to just basically have it all flowed out one after the other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I think that for myself, I mean, I usually have, rather than a to-do list for the day, I have a to-do list for the week. And on the days when I have a lot going on, I just don't even bother. It just seems like I've got enough going on, and I just try to attack the things that I can, where I can, when I can. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Christy. I find myself in that situation at work a lot. Maybe not necessarily as much with you know, what I'm doing in my personal life, but you know, I could have back-to-back meetings for a really long period of time and I get a lot of action items in those meetings. So even if I can't accomplish everything during the day, I do I have a small piece of paper or a sticky note that's by my desk, or I use the, you know, or I'll put it into the book that I use to take notes in at work. And I'll spend just a few minutes at the end of the day, just like dumping that information out of my head and getting it on the paper if it hasn't gotten done already. So that way I can kind of leave work with a clear mind. And if it's something that has to be done that day, like I need to get it done or I need to get it done for the next day, I'll put a little star by it, or sometimes I'll number them. So I like that concept of flow, of like seeing what kinds of activities flow into one another, because oftentimes it turns out that certain things have to get done before others, or it's better, it's easier if you do one task before you move into the next one.
Yeah, kind of similarly, a lot of times at the end of the day, if I finish something completely and tie a bow on it, then I'm often like, okay, I don't even know where to start in the morning. So sometimes I will just write a note for myself, like, here's where you need to start tomorrow morning, so I can just dive into that flow rather than spin my wheels trying to figure out where I left off and what I need to do next. Awesome. Okay, so the next question is, how do you engineer a satisfying monthly perspective using the weekly views? Or do you? So I will say for myself that I have I use a passion planner which has both a weekly view and a monthly view, and I use the weekly views much more frequently than the monthly view. I use the weekly view it's open all the time, and I'll use the monthly view as something to check back in on. Like if I'm scheduling something like what things do I have going on this week, each weekend or whatever, I might flip to the monthly. Another thing that I use the monthly view for is like if I happen to be doing a 30-day challenge or something like that, I'll write all the prompts in day to day so I can see the whole thing at once. But generally, I use my monthly view as a place to kind of track any habits. Like if I'm trying to make sure that I start a new habit and I want to make sure that I'm doing it every day, I might make a list there or do a check off there on the monthly view. But generally my weekly is where I work from. Anybody else? Cool. So we have two more questions, and most of these first ones come from my friend Mary Jane. So hi, Mary Jane. I know you can't make it. And the best way to use color coding and or flags. There's so much goodness in this, and we'll get into this a little bit at the end of what we're doing today. I'll share some of my ideas then. But if anyone wants to start with that, we can kind of geek out about that a little bit if you want.
I definitely use a lot of color coding for my calendar, and I'll highlight blocks of time according to what activity I'm doing. And the one that's particularly important to me is that I have pink is fun things. So I have to make sure that I have some pink in my week, so that I know that I've scheduled in some downtime or some something to do with a friend or a date with my husband. So if I see no pink on my calendar for the week, then I need to make sure I block out some time for myself somewhere.
I love that. That's great.
Hey, I'm going to test my mic. You can hear me?
Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Lizzie. I can hear you. I definitely do that too. I'm not super good at color blocking like whole passages and days. And you guys, some of you guys who were on last time know that I got really into these erasable highlighters or erasable pens. I gotta say, my erasable friction highlighters, like soft colors, it's impossible to see. So I haven't really used them very much. I might switch to another thing. But I do a little bit the same as Felicity, is I certainly for fun things. At least I'm circling. I've got these ridiculous multicolored pencils that like leave a like kind of a rainbow, and I will like circle time, and it's just really fun to color with those. So that's the kind of thing, like if I know it's something completely nerdy or completely me or completely family time or something like that that's not work, I put it in there now, and I'm trying with that. But yeah, with the multicolored pen, I definitely assign a couple of colors to, you know, stuff that's just like regular I have to do for work, something really important I have to do for work, something like a green for something that's like financially important to do. And yeah, so it's useful for me that way, but I'm not good at coloring in the whole calendar. I think reserving one color this year, my plan is to like plan with those colors, but then also use a different one to be more diary-like what I actually did get done, to sort of separate out what I plan and what I actually get done. Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So just kind of adding on to that, part of the way that I use my color coding is that I will, something that I have planned ahead of time, I will like write it on the calendar and then fill it in with the color that it goes with. And then if I do something, but it wasn't planned, I will still use color coding, but rather than filling it all in, I just make a box around it and say like, I'll give you an example. So this is actually a bad example. Let me go back to my old planner so you can see. Okay, so here we go. So all of the yellow is filled in because that's work. So it's already scheduled time. And then like some of these things were meetings that were filled in because they had to be done right then. But then these things that are just outlined in color, they are things that, you know, they're flex time, and I like to use my planner as a reflection of how I use my time. And so that allows me to look and see at a glance how I'm using my time as far as like what category of, you know, I use the colors for different categories of how I spend my time. So that's how I use that. Awesome, I love that. Okay, so the final question is bullet journaling. Do any of you bullet journal? And if so, how has it worked for you? So this is from Christy, who's actually here. Yay, you made it. I wish my 12-year-old niece was here. She said she was going to try and make it, but it's super early there, so I don't know if she'll be able to.
A little bit. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. But she's been starting this like really awesome bullet journal, and she's like super into it, and I was hoping she would share hers. But go ahead.
She should share pictures with us. So I have attempted to do bullet journaling because I need a more flexible space to write things down. I can't really do something. I wish my life fit into you can see all the 7 days on 2 pages and everything, but part of my life is very rigid. You know, I've taught class on Thursdays for the past 20 years of my life, right? So part of my life is very rigid. And, you know, I always have to, you know, make sure I know where my child is and stuff. But then the rest of my life is very much where I need to take notes when people call about potential meetings, gigs, contractors for trying to get the house rebuilt, stuff like that. So I need to take lots of notes. So I've tried to do bullet journaling because of that, because I need flexible space. I wish I could find some way that I had calendars and bullet journaling capabilities. I'm going to have to be a lot more on it this year because of the whole contractor aspect of my life. And so that's sort of why I'm sitting in on this, because I'm sitting here quite overwhelmed by what's coming up in the next year. So I think I just need to get better at the bullet journaling. I don't think that the whole coding of what thing got done and all of that stuff, I'm just a cross-off person. If it either got done or if it didn't get crossed off, I move it to the next list, right? And I tend to do Post-its. My to-do lists tend to be Post-its moved from one day to the next. And once my Post-it gets finished off, then I just chuck it, or sometimes I'll just move it to the back. And I don't know why I move it to the back, because I never go back and look at them again. But I don't know. So there tends to be like a stack of Post-its at the back where I'm like, so that tends to be my to-do list for bullet journaling versus trying to code them. But I guess the bullet journaling is more that I like the flexible space aspect of it. And sometimes I'll just make a little calendar and glue it in one of the pages, like a monthly calendar, and I'll just glue it. I have a different size book this year, so I'm gonna have to make a different size page on my computer to glue the calendar in. Anyway, so that is why I've done the bullet calendar. So I'd love to hear any other people that need a more flexible spaced kind of calendar. It's sort of what I'm listening for this time around.
Awesome.
Well, I'll just jump in because I was showing off very proudly, not the actual bullet journal, but the bullet journal book, which I got into. I think I heard him on the radio, and then the guy Ryder Carroll, who was showing up at Politics and Prose, he had a book talk, and I was like, okay, well, let me go see what this is all about. And what's fascinating is that it's meant to be a very simple system, and it can be as complex or not complex as you want it to be. And I took a look around. He's a little astounded. He's at how people have sort of taken it over in the community that's developed around it, and how it's helping lots of communities. And the thing is it started out apparently, according to his book, and I read the whole book, and it's got some very deep philosophical thoughts on self-control that's based out of this is a system that works for him because he had pretty significant cognitive or behavioral issues growing up, and he invented this thing that helped him keep himself in check. And then, people noticed it and prompted him to say, this could be helpful for other people. So it's really actually quite a beautiful thing to read through if you have the time to read the book. But his whole point is you do whatever you want to do, make it as complicated and pretty and whatever. And he doesn't want to be mean to anyone who's really put a lot of time and investment. And I notice a lot of economy has cropped up around it. Lots of people are selling stuff and, doing lots of things. And I find it fascinating, eerie, or upsetting that a lot of it is women doing lots and lots of Instagramming of how perfection and getting things. But if you get to the step that helps you, that's when it's worth it. So I've read it, and I'm going to adopt some of these things for this year. I got yet another passion planner, and I'm using the blank space pages at the back to set it up as a bullet journal, which I had sort of been doing natively, but I could never really find the page I was looking for. So I'm getting better about having an index page and numbering those blank pages at the back, and doing things that are called collections, which is basically individually creating little chapters for those various projects, like the one team that I have to carry through this year, or a personal project, or private work on the side, so that I can find them easily and readily. And I even got to the point of I've got these tiny little book dart clips. They're so cute.
Where do you get those?
Oh, I picked them up at Atomic Books, one of my favorite places. Okay. It's super thin, but you can find them at stationary places like Levenger or whatever. And it's hilarious because I'm completely against clips in books at work. We have to take them out a lot of the time, but I like to keep them. If it's useful and it's working for you and it tells you something about your life and day, then that's one way of doing it. You could do it with stickers. You can color, tab the other pages, but just simply numbering the pages and writing an index. And something new, like a new project started, you can create a new page, you can add stuff in, or you can move to the next notebook, or say this is in notebook house construction, and then just go to that one if you're keeping different things for different days. So, useful tools have been developed, and it comes out of actually hypertext and coding and what they call threaded conversations. So if you run out of space in one thing where you started something for your whole year, expand it in another module, and that's the module you keep for that project. So you don't want to be if you don't have to carry it around every day, that's fine. I'm starting to think about, because the passion planner thinger is so big, And I always want to save space and weight in my bag. I'm thinking about still setting up a daily bullet journal to carry stuff forward and then to maybe transfer once a week. It seems a little bit like double accounting and a lot of work. But last night I really started setting up for the year a little bit, and I found it really thoughtful. And I haven't been good at all about doing what, the bullet journal process of sort of daily reflection is, or the, compartmentalizing day to day, where am I moving forward? But I did find it kind of therapeutic last night to move from last year to this year. And the notes that I haven't finished in last year's journal, I'm probably going to just scan them into Evernote or something so I can carry it with me. But a few times this year on a long-term project, I've gone back to I know I took notes on this conversation on some day, and I went back and I was able to fairly find them quickly. But with the indexing, I'm going to be able to find it a lot more quickly.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I wanted to just say that although I use a passion planner, I also use some of the bullet journal methods in my passion planner for just recognizing for myself, where things are, if I've moved on from a point, if I, haven't done it yet, if I need to come back to it, if it's done. And then another thing that you reminded me of is that I actually use the indexing in a completely separate book that I just use. It's just an empty blank book that I use solely for all of my notes on building my business. And so having that table of contents and index kind of to keep things easily findable by page number is really good. So I can figure out, for instance, all of my, the pricing that I have is on all of these disparate pages, but I can find them easily because of the index. Or I think that kind of thing might work really well for you, Zia, for your planning this year.
Or just physically marking a page,
Yeah.
And you might be just visual enough to do that without the complexity of indexing. I think the thing that sings to me about indexing is that I work in archives, and we have almost a couple hundred years of records, and they used to keep notes this way. They used to keep letters of correspondence this way. And, clerks would sit there indexing, to whom at the end of the year, you'd have this big fat book, and then there'd be this beautiful alphabetized list at the beginning of okay, that happened on that day. The reason I'm not using it entirely or getting a whole blank book version of it is that, the passion planner thing, or any agenda with a date calendar, there's enough going on at work that is regular, and people are always oh, when are you free and how are we going to get this done? So it's already built. And writer of the bullet journal is if it's already there, don't reinvent it. Along the way, he dumped a lot of complexities that were in his original methods because some of them have been replaced. Some people might use Instagram as a visual diary, right?
Mm-hmm.
A picture a day, this is where I was. If you go back to it, people are into recording their TV show watching, I guess, and books. Now there's Goodreads. You don't have to keep a list for everything in your life. Just keep a list for what is useful to keep track of.
Yeah. Let's see. Thanks. That's awesome. Pam just raised your hand. If you want to unmute yourself.
That took a little. So I'm trying to be better at planning my year, and something that I started doing in the past year that might be interesting to people, because I'm really liking how it's working out for me, is I got these mini whiteboard index cards. And so you can erase and whatever. I'm using wet erase markers so that they're a bit more permanent. And then I have a little index card box for them. And I was trying to come up with a way of getting those old picture books, or a recipe card book or something, to put these in so that I could put them out and move them around. And I thought of bringing it up because of the whole discussion of indexing and being able to have flexible planning mechanisms, because you can essentially edit these lists. And then the way that I tend to store them is taking a picture of them. Like if I want to keep that, like instead of putting, I used to use the sticky note approach for saving my lists, and now I take a picture of the list before I erase it.
That's really cool. I've never heard of those before. Thanks for sharing that. And also, I think that's a really great idea to address one of our earlier questions, which was how do you integrate your digital and paper planning? And I really like that idea of writing it physically and then keeping it digitally available. That's cool. All right, fellas. Everybody, that's a gender neutral term that I just used. Okay, so we already kind of did show and tell, but is there anything that anyone wants just like super excited about that they want to talk about before we move on to the bulk of this? Okay, we'll move on. Let's see. Happy New Year, everybody. Woohoo! Here we go. This is our planning session. So get out your journal and your pen, and we are going to do 1-minute writing prompts. And I will give you the prompt one at a time. If you don't want to spend the time writing the minute or the question itself, you can just like number them, and you will have access to this video, and you can go back and see what the questions refer to if you want to, or you can just ask me and I'll send you a list of what the questions are if that's helpful. Let me pull up my timer and we will get going. So all right, so everybody ready? This is going to be the reason that we are doing this is basically to get our minds kind of in the realm of what's going to help this year, and how you need to focus, and to just kind of like get your brain in that space. And so these 1-minute writing prompts are going to help you figure out, be a little bit more focused as we move on. There's no right or wrong. These are just kind of like top of brain, whatever. Just write until we go to the next question. And here we go. So the first question is, where am I now? And I should mention, I think there's like 20 something. So this is a prolonged 20 something minute exercise that we're doing. All right, second question is, what did I learn this past year? What did I learn this past year? Sorry, keep going. Okay, the next question is, what am I loving? What am I loving? Question 4 is what is working? What is working? Question 5, what is not working? What is not working? Question 6, what do I want more of? What do I want more of? Question 7, what do I want to let go of? What do I want to let go of? Question 8, what do I want to upgrade? What do I want to upgrade? Question 9, what needs attention? What needs attention? Question 10, where can I lighten up? Where can I lighten up? Excuse me. Question 11, where can I go deeper? Where can I go deeper? Question 12, what do I spend my time on? What do I spend my time on? Thirteen, what is my focus? What is my focus? 14. What does my focus look like from the outside? What does my focus look like from the outside? Fifteen. What needs to be aligned? What needs to be aligned? Sixteen. Where do I want to grow? Where do I want to grow? 17. What is important to me? What is important to me? '18. What do I want from my life next year? This year. What do I want from my life this year? 19, what do I want to spend my time on? What do I want to spend my time on? $20, what would I like to focus on? What would I like to focus on? $21, we're down to the last couple questions. What energy do I want to infuse this year with? What energy do I want to infuse this year with? $22, more than anything, I want, fill in the blank. More than anything, I want, fill in the blank. All right, we are done with that section. How'd that feel to do that little project? Unmute yourself if you'd like to share. We can move on. Cool. Okay, so the next section that we're going to work us on is brainstorming some of the things that matter to you. So I would like you to now focus, write down a bunch of focus areas that you want to focus on this year. And I am going to share a list of potential focus areas. Great. So now that we've kind of like brainstormed all the things that matter, we're going to kind of condense it down to 10-ish that are the most important. It doesn't have to be exactly 10. It could be 7. It could be 12. But kind of see where there might be overlap. See if you can kind of smush it down a little bit. Choose the ones that are really, really the ones that you want to focus on this year. I found there was a lot of overlap in mine. And these ones that you're choosing are the ones that are going to help you rock 2019. These are the ones that are truly the ones that matter to you. There should not be any shoulds in this list. Right. Do we mostly have the 10-ish? Yeah, okay. All right, cool. So we're going to move on to this next little section, which is going to be a brainstorming for each of them. So I'm going to give you 7 minutes, and I'll break it up into minute things. So if you have more than 7, you can do it on your own time. If you are watching the replay, you might want to pause here and make sure that you get all the rest of them done. But basically, I would like you to take a minute for each area and brainstorm possible actions for 2019, and totally let yourself put outrageous, wonderful things in these. Okay, this is an exercise in what might we do, and you don't need to limit yourself here. Okay, so go ahead. We are starting with our 7 minutes. Six minutes. 5 minutes. Four minutes. Three minutes. Two minutes. One minute. Cool. Okay. So Great job. I would like to take a quick little 2 to 3 minute break to just go pee, go grab yourself some more tea or a snack, and we'll come right back, okay? So next we will be working on what commitments we have, but first, a quick little break. If you're watching the replay, I will cut this part out, so just pause it if you need to take a break. All right, we're mostly back, so let's get back to our work at hand. Now's the time to talk about commitments. So we're starting to delve into reality. We've had a really good little review of what we hope and dream, and hopefully we will be able to incorporate the things that we hope and dream for into this next year. But there is also a lot of things that we already have commitments to, and this is your opportunity to write down what your commitments are. So what are you already committed to, both ongoing as well as one-offs? And then also think about if there's any adjustments that need to be made, especially if we're parents. I feel like this is a place where people often put themselves last, and that might be something that needs to change. And now is a great time to figure out how you can make that change if necessary or possible. So give yourself a couple minutes to just kind of jot down, what are your commitments? And are there any adjustments that need to be made? I can see you're talking, Jeffrey, but I can't hear you.
Oh.
There, now I can hear you.
A lot of my commitments don't have to do with contractual commitments. They're just commitments to myself. That do they count?
Of course. Of course.
All right.
I think depending on where we are in our own personal growth, these commitments may or may not be farther along in the personal commitments and other people commitments and places commitments and stuff. And also depending on just where we are in our life, whether we had a tree fall on our house last year, or whether we, have to, take our children to the pool or pet our cats on a daily basis. Okay, great. So some of this exercise we might have to spend more time on. I want to make sure that we get to it all before people have to leave. There's already been some people that are like, I'll catch the rest on the replay. And you'll have access to the replay to spend longer on any part of this that you need to. But moving on, this is what we just did. We are going to start actually putting all of the stuff that's in our head and that we've journaled about so far into and onto paper. So we're going to start really loosely by talking about organic time. And the suggested way to do that is to break it up into season rather than month, because sometimes doing things month by month is just overwhelming. Like, how can I think 12 months ahead of time? But you can, most people have a easier time thinking about things in this fashion. So on a piece of paper or in your journal, go ahead and make this sort of grid where you've got each of the different seasons marked out. And then wherever the grid isn't, go ahead and make a little extra section that's called routine. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. In this, we are going to take everything that we've thought about and talked about so far and just kind of use our Post-it notes to fill in the winter, spring, summer, fall, and routine sections. So the routine includes anything that you're already committed to and things that you want to accomplish and do. So routine things can be daily, they can be weekly, they can be monthly, or just like a one-off thing. Just kidding, not one-off. That's not routine. And the goal is to have, like, this is my personal example. And basically, the way that I did it is my 7 things that we talked about, the focuses that we want to have in our life, I've got up here. And then I chose a different color for each of them so that in my planner throughout the year, if it is related to one of those 7 or major focuses, then I know what color to use. This is if you're interested in the color coding aspect of things. And then what we're focusing on, though, is filling up our seasons with different Post-it notes that go in each of them. So what do you want to get done this winter? What do you want to get done in the spring, summer, fall? There might be some that overlap. So for instance, I have a 4-month authenticity lab planned that starts at the end of January and goes all the way through May. So that is here. And then I have another one planned in the fall. So that kind of overlaps summer and fall. But I have things that lead up to them. And so the challenge for my authenticity lab is going to be solidly in winter, because I will be doing that next week, for instance. Is this making sense, and or are there any questions about this? Unmute yourself if you want to talk about it. Zia, are you talking? I can't hear you.
I'm talking to Morgan.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
showing him this.
Okay. Okay, cool. I found that when I did this, there was definitely overlap between all of the things that we had talked about and listed so far, as far as what's in our 7 focus areas and, you know, what we really need to get done, our commitments, and then what we want to get done. But I also found that there was actually, when I thought about things in this way, some different things popped up that I hadn't listed at all. So that's normal. All right, so the next section is going from this organic time. And if seasons don't work for you, there's like plenty of other organic ways to do it. Some people prefer doing things by the moon, or, you know, quarter, or, you know, I mean, I guess this is sort of quarter, but you could do it by however you want. smaller, larger chunks of time. But the next step is to actually sketch this into your calendar. So when we're putting things from an organic time into a linear time, some people do it specifically to a time. Some people like to keep it as a list and use it as a sort of like a buffet to choose from. Some people like to allocate like 3 hours a week to XYZ and then just remind yourself at the beginning of each week to allocate that time. And I think a really interesting thing here is to talk about the difference between planning versus scheduling. So planning is deciding to do something and being intentional about it, and that's what we've done so far. And then scheduling is when we actually put when we're going to do it, and that's what we're doing now. So going from the planning to the scheduling. Everything that you schedule for a specific day, if we're going down to the small day part of things, you should be able to do easily on an average day with average energy. So if you have, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so my body doesn't cooperate all the time. And so, you know, scheduling ahead of time to the teeth isn't going to work for me. And if you have, you know, mental or physical constraints like that, or just life that happens, you know, it's nice to consider that you might have things come up and that you don't want to make your life too full. At the same time, maybe you want to go ahead and schedule everything and just know that life happens, and be kind to yourself and know that you might not get everything done. And the trick here is to take all of the Post-it notes that you've got in your season and put them in your schedule either by month or week. If you have a big project that's written on your season, now is the time to break that big project down into specific, smaller, actionable steps and put that into your schedule week by week, for instance. And throughout this process, you want to be thinking about what your big focus is for the year and what your foci are in general. And if you are meeting that, you know, like Felicity said at the very beginning, having, you know, you've got your normal schedule, but then she wants to see that pink in her schedule to make sure that she's having fun for herself. This is a year where maybe that's a goal for you, or maybe you have more than one type of fun and you want to make sure that you have a couple of those every month or every week. Or that you have a lot of projects and you want to make sure that you have some time every week or month spent towards those various projects. I found for myself that attacking winter is all I could do right now. And I put a little note for myself at the beginning of spring to attack the springtime section. Cool. I'd like to invite you to share what you're finding here, if anything.
This is really helpful for me. I feel like I have a lot of abstract ideas about things that I'd like to work on, like more about like how I want to feel about the year or feel about projects that I'm working on, and to have to break it down into seasons, which is a larger chunk of time, is a much more tangible way to turn an abstract idea into an action, if that makes sense. So if I have, like, one of my things it's just the words fire and sparkle is like the energy that I'm going for. Like, well, like, what does that mean? Like, what, like, what kind of, like, what do those habits look like that create that kind of energy? And I think, like, thinking of it in a seasonal way, then I can, like, come up with 1 or 2 or 3 ideas of things to do that can make me feel that way.
Yay!
Yeah. So this is like, and I feel really excited about, like, I could probably spend all day like, making little flags of things that can give me ideas on how to get the feeling that I'm going for, or to put big ideas into action, and even just like small chunks of time.
Hey, I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, that's another reason that I wanted to do this in the morning, so you would have more time after we finish up to continue on your own. Anybody else want to share?
Jeffrey
You are unmuted.
One issue I get into year after year after year is that a lot of things get into like a year flow, and at the end of every year there's the things that just don't fit into the year because you have to always make choices.
Right.
And so I'm starting to think, having thoughts of maybe I should have a 2 or even a 3-year flow, so that the B items don't constantly get overridden by the A items.
That's a great idea.
It might be visiting this friend that's in Oregon, but every single year this other thing comes in. And so I'm thinking of trying to get into at least a 2-year flow.
Yeah.
Because there's things I do every year that I really should probably just do every other year or something.
Totally. I mean, I think that it is, once you have this framework, you can totally, make a grid of 12 rather than 4 and do it for 3 years. I found for myself that this past year, one of my goals for 2018 was to feel strong. And I worked dedicatedly toward feeling strong all 2018. And I don't feel strong at the end of the year. And I realized, like, that's okay. I worked toward the goal, and that's something that is a longer term goal that if I continue to work on it, eventually one day I might feel strong, and that's cool, So yeah, you can have specific things that you want to do over the course of several years, or, a longer term project that just takes longer. And this works equally for that longer time. Cool. All right. So our almost final thing is to come up with a word for the year. Oh, before we do that though, speaking about what you were saying about having, like, the idea of things that just kind of get relegated to the next year, whatever. This is an opportunity to use those focus areas and make your decisions based on those focus areas. Right? So, like, every year you might have slightly different focus areas, or they might be consistent across years, but use those focus areas as a check mark to see, like, should I, or do I actually have time or energy for this? Is this something that I want to spend my time on this year? Use those focus areas as a check on how you make your decisions throughout the year. All right, so the word of the year. Perhaps you may have already come up with this inadvertently with question number 21, which was what energy do I want to infuse 2019 with? It might be a word, it might be several words. But I have found that choosing a word or phrase or a couple words for a year can really define and help my years. And it might be the same for you. It's worth trying, even if you've never tried it before. Try it, see if it works for you. My word for the year is focus, but trust. So specifically to me, that means that this is my year to really focus on all the projects that I'm doing, but also to trust that what I'm doing on them is enough, and to not worry. So trust is like the opposite of worrying. So if I put in the time and effort, then I don't need to worry about it. I can trust that it's gonna put me where I need to be. And I would like to invite you to share what your word of the year might be.
All right.
Go ahead.
I'm going to work on patience. And that has to do with a little bit of just not really driving into the, it's funny when you see a planning person, it's always like what do we want to get done? Mm-hmm. So this is a little bit more of like, not trying to drive all of it too hard.
Yeah, hands off.
A little bit.
Yeah.
For me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yeah. Let's see, I'm unmuting you, or trying to. Maybe you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
I really like, and I'm using this in a different sense, I really like what Felicity said about sparkle and joy. In doing this exercise, I'm huge with tasks and lists, and but my brain is always checking off the task, moving to the next one. And
yeah.
And then the list just keeps growing and growing. And that's what your life becomes, is that, you know, even if you're like accomplishing goals, it's another check, but there's no feeling of validation there. So it's, it becomes a big weight, because that's the endless. In looking at this particular year, I've had a lot of hardship and a lot of time to think. So my learning from 2018 is learning the difference between self-comfort and self-care. And in doing what I intuitively knew, I realized why I never felt better for making these efforts was because they were self-comfort things and not actually achieving self-care. And so learning those fine differences and what it means to me now in life. So my new one is sparkle and joy in being active and checking off lists and accomplishing goals and actually enjoying that has happened. So
that's awesome. Yeah, celebrating how you have spent your time. Yeah, I think that's a really big thing, is crossing off lists is one thing, and some people that's enough to give them a sense of accomplishment. For me, if I just cross something off a list, then I feel like I haven't given myself enough like pat on the back for doing something. So earlier I was showing you the color codedness that I have for how I spend my time. And it's not to be pretty. It's really so that when I'm feeling shitty about myself, I can look back and say, how did I spend my time? And I know exactly how I spent it. And so I can feel less bad about it and realize that like, oh, I didn't actually waste as much time as I thought I wasted. And in fact, I spent a lot of time doing things that I really care about. Or this thing got in the way and I had to deal with it right away, which meant that I didn't have time for the other things that I do care about. But that happens sometimes, and there's no reason for me to feel bad about that. So that's kind of one of the reasons that I do the color coding that I do. It's not to keep it pretty, but to actually achieve some of that self-care. I love it. Anyone else want to share?
I got a little bit, I guess, of a leg up on this. I had the chance to, there's a 7-step process that I learned this last year for setting an intention that's been really powerful for me. And so I did that, and I did a little bit of journey work on New Year's. And that kind of crystallized things for me. I think the words for this year are, for me, be seen. I've been in a hermit phase for about the last 9 years.
It's a long time.
So it's that stepping out of what's become a comfort zone and talking more about what it is that I've been doing. And, I added some additional words onto that because there are certain things that I want to be seen for. And so that kind of deepens it a little bit further.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, cool. So thank you guys so much for joining me today and doing this work. I think that you will find that the work that you have put in place today will really carry you throughout the year. I wanted to offer that if you feel like you need some focused help planning or scheduling your life, I'm available for that as a coach anytime. And if you enjoyed working with me, or if you know someone who might benefit, I have a challenge coming up, a 5-day challenge that will take place like this online. It's free as well. And basically, if you still feel blocked or stuck in some way in your life, or you just kind of feel blah, or if you know someone who does, and this might be helpful, basically this 5-day challenge will help you go from feeling those feelings to feeling like, oh, okay, I understand where my block is, how to kind of start working on it and breaking it down by simply reflecting on some specially designed prompts, kind of like what we did today. And yeah, so that's something that I have coming up. The dates are January 14th through the 18th. And if you're interested, you can go to my website, awakenoauthenticity.com, and then go up to where it says services. And there's a link to this challenge in services. You do need to register for this because it's a private group so that we can feel safe in sharing. But it's open to anybody who wants to join. So please share that out if you are not interested, or if you are interested and want some accountability and want to invite your friend, that's totally cool too. So let's see, that's it. Thanks so much again. And yay. I will see you next time. Thanks again for joining the Planner Jam. Have a good 2019, y'all.